Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. This is Brad Cartwright from Econ Course Companion. And today we're going to take a look at revenue, sort of the second part of the first chapter of Theory of the Firm, which is called Cost, Revenue, and Profit. If you haven't watched the videos on costs, I would suggest that you go back there and watch them, because today we're going to take a look at revenue. And revenue, of course, is critical to understanding how a theory, how a firm is going to make its decision in theory, right, before it puts its products onto the market. So here we go. All right, first of all, some definitions. Revenue, total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue. And just like I've done in the other videos, if you've been tracking on this, I want you to focus on something called total, something called average, and something called marginal. And if you're into theory of the firm, you realize, like, wow, this total, average, and marginal thing happens a lot. And what follows it is always something else, like revenue, and revenue, or in the cost section of this unit, it was product, and product, or cost, and cost. Because what you need to see is there's some general ways in which we're going to calculate numbers here, calculate things. And what we're always going to do is figure out the total, then we're going to figure out the average, and we're going to figure out the marginal. And that should be good news to you, because that way you already know how to do the math. I mean, if you want to know what total revenue is, just add it all up. You know that intuitively. If you want to know how much you're making per product, well, add it all up and then divide by the amount of products that you have. You can find an average easily. This is easy math. And just remember, marginal is just what happens if you add one more thing. So total revenue is going to be total revenue. Average revenue is going to be the revenue you make per product, and marginal revenue is how much money you're going to make if you make one more thing, okay? So just to get that overview, it's really helpful for students, because sometimes, man, you can just get lost in these terms and you think it's all complicated, and then you realize you're actually capable of this conceptually, okay? So, but let's get down to looking at some terms. Revenue, of course, is the money a firm receives from selling its products, goods, and services over a certain period of time. Pretty straightforward. Add up all the money, right, on the goods that you sold. If you sold, 100 water bottles and they're $10 each, you made $1,000. There's your total revenue. Okay. Total revenue is the total amount of money that a firm receives from selling a certain amount of good or service in a given period of time. I kind of did those two together, but you get it, right? All you're going to do to figure this out is multiply price times quantity. Like I just said, that's really easy. What's the price of your good? $10. How many did you sell? 100. Oh, okay. So total revenue is 10 times 100, so $1,000. Cool. Average revenue is the revenue a firm receives per unit of output. And the thing is, like, well, that's pretty simple. If you just think about water bottles, let's see. We charge $10 a water bottle. We made 100 of them. And so our average is what? $10 a bottle. Or you take the total revenue, 1,000, and divide it by the quantity, all right, which is 100. And therefore, you end up with what? The average revenue per bottle, which is $10. And so AR, therefore, is always equal to the price of the product. Right? Of course it is. The average revenue is always equal to the price of the product. Why? Because that's the price that you're getting for each unit, and so the average is the same. It's going to be the price, okay? And this is assuming that nothing goes on sale. There's assumptions in here, of course, but average revenue is always equal to price. Remember that, okay? Marginal revenue, remember, margin is one more thing of something. So what is the revenue a firm gains when it sells one more unit of product in a given period of time? So it's a change of total revenue divided by the change in quantity. Or you can just figure out, like, how much more did you make per product and add it to the total revenue, okay? So that's the language. You need that language before we even go forward, and I think that's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at the next slide. All right, now we're going to create two different scenarios, because remember that theory of the firm is a model, right, that you create, which is called cost, revenue, and profit. We're in the middle of that, and then we're going to apply this to different market structures. So those market structures are perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. So firms are going to behave different in the structures in which they operate, okay? And as a result of the different structures, some things are going to be different, and what's going to be different and fundamentally different is the difference between what the market looks like, right, in perfect competition, which is right here, yeah, maybe another star just to make it look cool. Perfect competition, okay? And this is the example. We're going to have two examples. The first example is what happens in perfect competition. The other example, number two, is what happens in monopoly, monopolistic competition, and also oligopoly. Okay, so we're talking about perfect competition here. And what's different about perfect competition as opposed to the other market structures is that, and this is critical, firms are what? Price takers. They take the price from where? From some sort of outside force. It's given to them, and the foreign exchange market is the best thing. Where does that price come from? It comes from the foreign exchange market. And all money changers on the planet have to charge that price for the sale of one currency into another, okay? So as a result of that, and this is pretty straightforward, I think, you can see, therefore, there's going to be a relationship, a direct relationship between demand, average revenue, margin revenue, and price. So if the price is $5, just look at this chart given to us by Jocelyn Blink. By the way, Jocelyn Blink's Course Companion is excellent. If you're not using it and you're working on this on your own, I suggest you take a look at it. It's super good. I use it here with my students here in Santiago, Chile, and it's the most widely used Course Companion on the planet. It's excellent. Anyway, this graph's from her. This table's from her. And so, quantity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and total revenue, of course, is price times quantity, so you're just going to multiply those out, and we get 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, right? So what's the average revenue? Well, for each product, how much more money do we make? Well, let's see. We made $5 more. And marginal revenue is the difference between the sale of one product and two products, and how much money do we make? 5. So marginal revenue in perfect competition, when there is when you have a perfectly elastic demand curve, or the elasticity of demand is infinite, which it is in perfect competition, as I'll show to you in a second, then you're going to have a situation where price equals average revenue and also margin revenue and also demand, okay? So the demand curve is also going to be the average revenue curve, and it's also going to be the marginal revenue curve, and it's also going to be set at the price that those firms have to take in the marketplace, because in perfect competition, they have no choice. They must accept the price coming to them from an outside force. All right, so let's take a look at that. And how would that look? Well, if we were to graph these things, what we would see is that if price is equal to $5, then we start that there. Then what? Average revenue for every product we make, right? Or every product we sell, what is the average revenue we get? $5. And we go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. What is the marginal revenue we get from going from one unit to the next? One more unit of output? 5. So in perfect competition, bing, 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 important point, the demand curve, the average revenue curve, and the marginal revenue curve are the same line. They equal one another, okay? And here that is down there. Remember that point, because we are creating revenue curves, and we will, at some point in a future video that you watch, connect the cost curves and put the marginal cost curve here and the average variable cost and the average total cost curves on here, and we will have ourselves a complete diagram. But just for now, just know that demand equals average revenue and marginal revenue in perfect competition. Well, how would we figure out total revenue? Well, that's pretty easy, right? That's just, what's total revenue? It just goes 5, 10, 15, 20, which is just the multiplying of price times quantity all the way out, and out to its extreme in this example, which is, the price, our total revenue is at $35 when we sell 7 products. Why? Because the price is 5. Okay? So that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 1, in perfect competition, when demand, average revenue, and marginal revenue equal one another. All right. Hold on to that important point. We need to put a nice fat star right there and another one right there. Okay. So in perfect competition, this is the revenue curves that we are going to draw. Next slide. Okay, scenario number 2. This is the scenario for monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. And let's take a look. Scenario number 2 is the impact on revenue when price falls as output increases. That's a downward sloping demand curve. We know that. That's pretty straightforward. So what happens to total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue when price falls as output increases? And you will see on the next slide, we get a very different set of curves from the one below. And this is because price varies as output increases. And that we know that, right? I mean, think about it. If we have a graph like that, and that's terrible. If we have a graph like that, right, what's our demand curve going to look like? Our demand curve is going to look like that. Why is it downward sloping? Well, because the producers know that if they want to sell more of a product, they have to do what to the price? Lower it. It's this negative relationship, okay? And so that is going to affect average revenue, and it's going to affect marginal revenue, as we will see in a second. And, of course, it will affect total revenue. All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to suggest to you, if you are to stop the video right now and take a look at this slide, take a look at this table right here, and try and figure out price, quantity demanded, total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue, and price elasticity demand. Remember, price elasticity demand is calculated by a change in price over a change in the quantity demanded of a product, okay? So do yourself a favor, stop the video and try to figure out and work out how all of these numbers came to be, and this also comes to us from Jocelyn Blank, okay? So do that now. Cool. What you might see after you do all that math is you're going to see that average revenue is equal to the price, right? Remember that? Average revenue is equal to the price. So it falls as output increases. And if you look at average revenue here, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20, all the way down to 0, what happens to the price? Well, it's following the same trend. So that tells us that the average revenue is equal to the price of a product. And we know that. That makes sense, right? Because the average revenue is the price that we make per unit of output. So that is a pretty interesting little connection that we'll make, the consequences of it we'll look at in a second. All right, what else do we know? It's that marginal revenue falls as output increases, but at twice the rate. So as output increases, the marginal revenue falls. Let's see. As output increases, right, marginal revenue falls. And actually, we see for the first time in econ, IB econ anyway, it goes down below 0, okay? And that's a pretty interesting relationship, and you can see that the marginal revenue is always, this is a change of 70, and that's 35, right? This is a change of 50 total revenue, and that is 25. And the change of revenue here is 30, and it's a change of 15, right? And onward, this is the difference of 10, and it's 5. And so there's a relationship between marginal revenue and total revenue, of course, and we can see that marginal revenue is decreasing steadily. Excellent. Okay. So therefore, marginal revenue is below average revenue because in order to sell more products, the firm has to lower the price of all products sold, losing revenue from the ones that could have been sold at a higher price. Check it. That makes sense. Marginal revenue is going to be roughly half of what average revenue is. Okay, cool. Now, the other thing I want you to take a look at here is price elasticity demand, and it is decreasing, 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 decreasing. It gets down to 1 and then continues to fall all the way down to 0.11, okay? But this point right here of a price elasticity demand of 1 is a very important point, and I'm going to make that point right now. Check it out. All right, connection to price elasticity of demand. Now, if you have studied, well, of course you've studied elasticity of demand because you're sitting in theory of the firm, okay? If you remember from price elasticity of demand, the optimal price quantity combination for a firm is when it is unit elastic. When the percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in the quantity demanded in the marketplace. Okay, so if you remember, this is just like the generalized price elasticity of demand curve. P1, Q1, this combination right here is the maximum revenue that can be earned in this chart or in this graph. Any other combination of price and quantity would result in smaller revenue. Or another way of thinking about it is the area of this rectangle here is greater than the area of a rectangle that would be created by any other like combination of price and quantity. And therefore, this point right here at unit elastic, when price elasticity demand equals 1, is where the firm is maximizing its revenue. That's a critical point, okay? So if you remember from your studies, you might have been given a situation where price elasticity demand equaled 3.3, and what you might remember is that if price elasticity demand is greater than 1, firms need to lower their price until it gets to 1. Or in other words, if they find out that their price elasticity demand is elastic, which is any value above 1, they need to lower their price and they will increase revenue. If a firm finds that their price elasticity demand is less than 1, or in this case 0.626, then they know that they're selling their product at an inelastic portion of the demand curve, and the solution to increase revenues is to actually raise the price, right? They lower the price too much, raise the price, and they will maximize revenue where PED equals 1. Okay? So that makes sense. Now, hold on to that idea and just take a look at this next diagram. Boom. Whoa, wait a second. Check it. A lot's going on this diagram. Okay, let's decipher what's going on here. Okay, first of all, the first thing I want you to do is I just want you to stay where we were. We were looking at a demand curve and price elasticity of demand, right? Demand curve, and remember we said that average revenue is always equal to demand. So what we found here is, as we go down this curve, there's a point, right, where we would find that price elasticity demand is 1. And if you think about that chart, that point would be right here. And look at where that corresponds to. Check it, hold on a second. That equals that your product is unit elastic at the very moment that your marginal revenue actually hits 0. And as one of my students very astutely said, that's because, mister, you're neither winning nor losing by selling that amount. And that's exactly right. You couldn't benefit more, right, by lowering the price, and you couldn't benefit more by raising the price. You're right where you need to be, right at that unit elastic point. And watch this. That happens also to be at the total revenue maximization point. Check it. Oh my goodness, all this stuff is coming together. Yeah, it is. At 10 units sold, 10 units, we find that is where not only where the marginal revenue curve crosses 0 or is 0, but it's also where we operate at a unit elastic point of where price elasticity demand equals 1, and it's also where we have maximized our revenue, okay? Those are intimately related with one another. So think about the power of that. That's powerful stuff because, a firm might not always know when it's unit elastic. That's pretty hard to know. But what it really wants to know when it's maximizing its revenues. That doesn't mean it's profitable, as we'll get to in a second. It just means it has the maximum amount of money coming into it. But that same point then, but if they might not know where that is, but they could know where actually when they increase production, they start losing money. And if they decrease production, right, they're losing money also, right? Because that is related to this. If they have rising productivity up to here, and then falling productivity, right? And this marginal revenue is climbing until it gets to there, right? And if they produce any more, their revenue is going to fall. So this point is analogous to that. So if they can figure out when their marginal revenue equals 0, then they find their perfectly unit elastic point, and they also find where they are maximizing revenue. And my friends, that is pretty much magic right there. All right, now moving forward, what I want you to realize in terms of revenue curves, this total revenue curve is going to kind of disappear. But the generalized revenue curve that we are going to use is going to be those cost curves. Remember the marginal cost curve, the average total cost curve, average variable cost curve. Those are going to be superimposed on top of a demand curve, which is equal to average revenue, and the marginal revenue curve, which is always roughly half of average revenue. Okay, and this is the situation. Remember, this is the situation in monopoly. It's the situation in monopolistic competition, and the third market structure where it is the situation is oligopoly. Okay, that is pretty cool. So let's think about that again and make some general conclusions. Take a look. So the basic rules, I've put these two diagrams together. The basic rules are that when price elasticity of demand is elastic, any firm wishing to increase revenue should lower its price. Lower its price to there. Lower its price, maximize revenue. Oh my goodness, that's so cool. And when price elasticity of demand is inelastic, any firm wishing to increase revenues should raise its price. Hey, that's right here, raise your price, and you get up there. Hey, if you're operating out here, raise your price, you'll be more profitable. Where? Oh my God, check it, that's where you maximize revenues, right there, right? And of course, when price elasticity of demand is unitary, then any firm wishing to increase revenue should do nothing. You did it. Congratulations. Keep selling. You're maximizing revenue. You're maximizing your marginal revenue is zero. You found unit elasticity, and you have maximized your revenue. Wow, my friends, let me tell you something. That's a lot of information, right? That is a video that includes many, many things that are critical to your understanding of this whole big picture, which is cost, revenue, and profit. We've built the costs. If you've seen previous videos, you understand the cost curves. Now we just put in two different looking revenue curves. They're the same thing, but they look different. One for perfect competition, where demand equals average revenue and also equals marginal revenue. And then we looked at a different situation, because market structures create our behavior as human beings, or human beings behave differently in different market structures. We've seen a situation where in monopolistic competition, oligopoly, actually demand would still equal average revenue, but the marginal revenue is going to fall at twice the rate. But where marginal revenue hits zero, that is the revenue maximizing moment. And it would also be, that's right, where your product experiences unit elasticity. All right, my friends, I hope you found this video to be helpful. Take care of yourselves. Trust yourselves. If you didn't understand something in this video, go back and learn it again. But more than anything, you got this. Remember, economics is just human behavior. All of this data and these diagrams are the result of our behavior. So just think about how you would behave, and you'll understand econ much, much better. All right, my friends, talk to you later. Hope you thought this was helpful. Ciao.